Hey friends, thanks for joining me. We're going to talk about the wood lathe and how to use it safely and effectively. All right, so the wood lathe is essentially a motor that will spin lumber between centers or just on a plate. So we have some things we have to be aware of. The first thing we have to be aware of is, for safety wise, you never want to have anything that's loose or hanging. I wear a lanyard for teaching. I will tuck it under this apron. I usually wear an apron so I have nothing on the front that could catch. I will take my sleeves and I will roll them way up. Sometimes I'll even take my watch off. Another thing you have to be aware of is there are chips flying off of this. So you absolutely have to wear safety glasses. And if you're working with a rough piece, say you're doing something that's an actual limb, I would recommend a face shield too. So those are some of the safety concerns you have to be aware of. It could pull something in if you allow it to happen, or chips could fly off and hit you. So face shield, definitely safety glasses, and nothing hanging off the front. You want it slick. You want to either tuck in your shirt or wear an apron or make sure nothing can be grabbed in here. So with the wood lathe, we have a tool rest that slides on the ways. I call these the ways. That's what we call them with our metal lathe. And so this is your rest. It holds the tool rest here. You lift this up and then you can, ooh, that's painful in the ears. Then you can slide this to where you need it. Once you get it into a spot, you would undo this lever and you could move this tool rest. You want this tool rest pretty close to the work. So let's set up how we're going to do something. So many times we'll get a block here that we're going to turn down. What I usually like to do is I like to put it through the table saw so it's a square. Then I cut the ends so that they're flat on the ends. I will then take a square and mark from corner to corner, and that will give me an X in the middle. Then I will take a scratch awl. I will put the scratch awl in the middle and give it a little tap. I'll do that on both ends. Then we will get to this point where I have a little divot in both ends. At that point, I put my lumber on the sprue and I can take a little mallet and kind of tap it to seat it, just gently. You don't have to do it hard. I'll bring the tailstock in. This piece here is called the tailstock. It has a center. I'll put that in the other point that I made, the other divot that I made with the scratch awl. And at that point, I will lock the tailstock in place. Now, this can move. This is supposed to move. So I want to make sure this is loose. Now I'm going to turn, and what that's doing is that's putting pressure against here. It's going to lock in those teeth onto this piece. So I'm turning that in. I'm getting it tight. I want it to lock into those teeth so it doesn't just spin and dig out a hole here. I want it to be connected to the machine. And once I do that, then I'm going to turn it, make sure it turns. It turns just fine. Now I want to get my tool rest close. I like it about a ½ inch away. So a lot of times I'll have to turn this, or maybe I'll turn it this other way. I'll have to angle this. And most of the time, you can't do the whole thing at once. Sometimes you can, if you have a smaller piece. It just all depends. So I have it in pretty good shape. I'm going to move it up where it's just below the center line of my piece. Then I'm going to lock this here, lock it down like that. So now my tool rest is not moving. I want to spin it to make sure the piece of material is not going to hit the tool rest or get too close. So now I'm good to go. I could turn it on and we could go. The first thing I want to look at here though is this is a rough cut. I'm roughing out. So I want a lower speed. Right now it would be on a finishing speed. I'm going to turn it way down. This machine, you have to adjust it when it's on. So we're good to go here. We're safe. We have a flat apron on. I got nothing hanging. I'm going to roll up this sleeve also. I have my tools out of the way here, so I'm not leaning down in this way to get a tool. They're off to the side here. So now I'm good to go. I'm going to turn on my machine. It's spinning good. I'm going to pull this back and adjust it down to a roughing out speed. So I want a nice slow speed to rough out because I still have a square basically that I want to turn down to a cylinder. So I got to take these corners off. So the first thing I will use is called a gouge. This tool is called a gouge. It has a shape on it, kind of a conical type shape. It's meant for roughing out. When I do this, I like to put one hand, the tool needs to rest on the tool rest. We're not holding it up here because if you hold it up here, it can grab and slam down on there, possibly hurt your fingers, possibly mess with the project. So rest your tool on the tool rest. I like to put my finger right along this edge here so I can go back and forth and keep an even depth of cut. And then my other hand, I keep down on the end of the handle and I have my elbow touching my body, and this is kind of used as the rudder of your boat to where you can turn and go. I have this tight in my hand though, and so I'm sliding this hand along the tool rest, and this hand is rigid against my body so things aren't chattering and moving around. So we're going to go here and I'm going to do just a little bit and then we'll talk a little bit more about what we're looking at. So you saw it stop there. That usually means that this needs to go in tighter. I need to have a bigger divot, or I need to screw this in tighter so that this doesn't stop. It's sliding around a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen this and turn it in some more so we can get that tighter into our machine so it doesn't stop and spin. Actually, it's not a bad thing. Sometimes I'm okay with that because that means it's not like the tool's not going to jam in here and then do weird things. So I'm okay with that happening. We just want it to get a little bit tighter. So now we're tight. I'm going to tighten this up, make sure it's not going to move back on its own. Now we're going to restart. I'm using my gouge, and as you saw, I'm using my gouge. I'm going in. I'm keeping an angle like this, so that wood can come over and it could cut and make a chip on the same angle as my gouge. So I'm like this. I'm not straight in like that. I'm like this, where I'm at an angle down. And then I can also, as I travel, I can turn my gouge and use my gouge as I go along here. Another little tip, see we're working this, it's becoming more of a cylinder. A tip that I've learned the hard way, start in the middle and then work towards the end. Don't start on the end and work towards the middle, because that can lead to like this chipping out and splitting out. Start in the middle and then work towards the end. So we have our piece that we're working down. I'll keep moving this down to a cylinder, and then when I get it to a cylinder, I get it all the corners taken off, then I can move to a more fine tool. If I want to do some intricate work, I can use a smaller gouge. I can use something like this also. There's just different knives that you can use for different profiles or different shapes. So one thing I will say is you can sand on this. You can sand your piece, but when you do that, I always take out the tool rest, set it aside, and then I hold the sandpaper on both sides. And if it grabs, it just pulls it out of my hand, and I'm not like this to where something could happen and then it could pull me in. I never want to get into a position where this thing could pull me in. So I take the sandpaper and I hold it on the back side. Another tip is when I sand, I use a dust mask, so I'm not breathing in all that dust and all that really fine particles. Okay friends, so that's the basics of the wood lathe. I'm sure I'll think of other things as students are using this, and we'll continue to talk about stuff. The lathe is a super fun tool. I remember back in high school, I learned how to use this, and I just started making like a cylinder, and then I was like, well, maybe I can make a leg. And so I made one leg, and I thought, maybe I can turn it into a table. And so I made 4 legs exactly the same. They had square ends with cylinder in the middle, and I made that into a table, and my parents still have that table at their house. So you can do a lot of really fun projects. I recommend just going and experimenting, seeing what you like to do on it, and having a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching, friends.